Whew, week one of college football. I mentioned on the last episode that I thought that we were in for somewhat of a chaos season, and boy, did that rear its head in week one. Just elite entertainment all around. From Thursday night with Boise State and USF all the way up here to Sunday with Notre Dame in Miami. Upsets all over the place, it seemed. Just so much of what we expected did not come to fruition. So many other things happened. The entire landscape already seems to just be a jumbled mess that is completely impossible to decipher right now, but we're going to try anyways. Man, this is what was so hard about this offseason. I just knew something inside just said this is going to be a crazy, crazy year for college football. And my God, week one is here. It is come and it has gone, with the exception of TCU and North Carolina tomorrow night. And man, if that game is anything like the games that we've had in each of the windows throughout this past weekend, then we are in for a real treat. But without farther ado, let's get into some of these reactions to week one. So it is Sunday night here. I did just finish watching Notre Dame at Miami, but I'm going to put it in reverse, go back to yesterday afternoon, actually yesterday morning, 11 a.m. Texas at Ohio State, going to start here. Now, final, Ohio State 14, Texas 7. This was not as close as the score makes it out to be. This game was a lot farther apart than it seems, especially if you didn't watch it. I mean, Ohio State really, they were impressive. They owned Texas, and that was not, there was no doubt in that in this game. The shock to me was how bad Arch Manning played. And I kind of mentioned it a little bit, like I said earlier last week. He's been there, he's developed, he's been in the system, but how is he going to react when the lights come on? Well, he did not react well. The Texas wide receivers, they were not of great help. They didn't really get a lot of separation. Any balls that were thrown to them they would drop some even if they weren't contested. The Ohio State defense here played absolutely out of their minds. The secondary played elite. The D-line was plug and play from last year. They did great on the run. They controlled. Texas put up a bit of a number on the ground, but Ohio State controlled it. It was, if you just go back, if you go look at the stat, it looks like they, were an average. Texas was average on the ground if you look at the stat, but it doesn't even look like it was average if you watch the game. Ohio State, they just controlled it so well. It was pretty situational. Texas got a lot between the 20s on the ground, but once they got in that red zone, man, they got shut down. Julian Sayin, he played opportunistic as well, and definitely, if you look at the stat line between him and Arch Manning by the end of the game, pretty similar, but he was just efficient and opportunistic, played a hell of a lot better of a game, threw the ball a lot better, a lot more confident, managed the offense for them a lot better. Ohio State impressed me. After all of the draft picks that they lost after replacing both coordinators, you would think if you watched this game that Texas was the one that replaced both coordinators, because Ohio State did not miss a beat. They played elite. Like I said, on the D-line, the defense in general, bend but don't break. Matt Patricia, absolutely phenomenal job here. It's kind of crazy because Texas is the one with continuity at the coordinators, at that position. Steve Sarkisian's the offensive coordinator, really, and the play caller there. And, he's had Arch Manning there sitting in the wing waiting, developing, and that just did not work out at all. Ohio State, they held Texas to, 1 in 5 on fourth downs. That's 20%. They allowed them to convert only 1 out of 5 times, which, Texas gave them the ball back in what could have, they could have kicked a field goal. They were in scoring position, and they went for it. They gave them the ball back because they couldn't get it. They forced one turnover. It was an interception. They played very, very disciplined too. Ohio State did. Only 2 penalties for 15 yards. That was another thing I noticed is Ohio State was just flying around after the ball, and it's kind of easy sometimes, especially on the defensive side, whenever you're playing aggressive like they were, to be called for a penalty, but they were not. They played very, very disciplined. Texas, on the other hand, 6 penalties for 50 yards. Now, Arch Manning, like I mentioned earlier, the receivers struggled to get separation on the side of Texas. They were not winning contested balls. But Arch Manning also, he was off target and inaccurate a lot at times too. But even some of the balls that, were more, that were catchable, they didn't, catch all of them. But, the ones they did too, this is the part of the problem is the ones that they did, they were high or they were, behind the receiver. They had to go to the back shoulder and twist and it threw them off, off balance and they couldn't recover quick enough to get downfield for yards after catch. It didn't seem like the moment was necessarily too big for Arch Manning. He just looked inexperienced. He was 9 for 15 for 38 yards at the end of the third quarter. So I think he ended up with 170 on through the air, but that was through some garbage time fourth quarter trying to catch up type of passing situations. So he just looked inexperienced. I mean, he looked like a true freshman out there, which is kind of concerning because he's been there for 2 years. They didn't run terrible, just not enough to make up for the lack of passing game. So, the play calling was fairly vanilla. There wasn't a lot of, downfield throws, which a lot of that has to do with Ohio State's defense. But Ohio State, back to them, they just looked like the best team in the country yesterday, honestly, especially on the defensive side. I mean, I cannot rave enough about the way that defense played. It was very impressive, and I'm a guy that loves to watch. I mean, I love a good electric, explosive offense, but watching a defense just freaking take over a game just really gets my gears going. Julian saying he was obviously the best quarterback on the field. Like I said, opportunistic and efficient. The other thing about the Ohio State defense, let me touch on them again. I think they had the number one defense in the country last year, and they might be better this year. I mean, that's insane, but I don't know. It's a bit of an overreaction to a week one game is what I just said right there, but I don't know. They just played very well, very disciplined, very competitive. You could kind of, I'd say, sum up Texas's performance with two truths and a lie. Truth number one, they're still likely a tier 1 SEC team, probably a tier 1 college football team. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt for a little while. They're likely still a tier 1 team. Truth number two, I expect their play to elevate throughout the season, especially offensively, because their defense played pretty well. So offensively, I expect that play to elevate. I expect Arch Manning to round into form. And that's the two truths. The lie is that Arch is a bust. Now, a lot of people are going to make that joke or say that or crap all over him. I mean, he's not a bust. There was a lot of expectations put on him that he did not ask for, but, it kind of comes with the territory, especially if you're Manning. But regardless, first game, I'm not ready to, dump my stock yet or abandon ship or anything like that. I think, like I said, his play will elevate. They'll round into form. It is a bit concerning, like I said, 2 years in the system, and he comes out looking so unrefined. So will experience help mold him? Will experience kind of help refine his play? Or will he just kind of continue to be erratic? That's really the two, erratic as in, mechanics are rushed, throwing inaccurately. That's really the two kind of routes here. It's kind of like we're at a fork in the road, and that's kind of the two directions that this thing is going to go. I'm going to choose as of now. It's only week one. I'm not going to overreact. I'm going to choose as of now to say that more experience will mold and refine his game, and he'll elevate throughout the season. But it is possible that he takes that other route and it just doesn't get much better, and it's just kind of erratic. I mean, I don't expect that to be what it was, but I also didn't expect that poor of a performance yesterday. So with that being said, great game for the 11 o'clock. Going into the end of that, of that game, I wasn't really looking forward to what we had coming up next. But my God, if Alabama at Florida, boy, that game did not disappoint. Now, I'll be honest, after that first drive that Alabama put on the field, after that showing, I was like, oh, it's going to be a long couple of hours before this night game with LSU and Clemson. But my God, did that go by quick, because that was the funnest game to watch all day. Alabama at Florida State. The final score, Florida State 31, Alabama 17. Alabama was a 13 and a half, I'll say. 2 touchdowns, somewhere in there. At kickoff, they were a 2-touchdown favorite. Whew. Now, a lot of us have prayed for this, for the downfall of Alabama. I'm going to come at this from an unbiased perspective, however much I can, because I'm not a Bama fan. So really, in college football, you're either a Bama fan or you're not a Bama fan. You're not indifferent on Alabama. You're not like, yeah, they're kind of fun to watch. I like them. Alabama, great program. We kind of say that now that Nick Saban's gone, now that everyone's kind of taken a step back to admire what Nick Saban was. But overall, it's like, screw Alabama, because they're at the freaking top every year, and we were all tired of it, right? So it seems like that's kind of chipping apart piece by piece. The biggest thing about this game is that Alabama was just outmatched. They got out-physicaled, and they were not competitive when it comes to compared to Florida State. I mean, they were just dead on arrival. I mean, they were not playing like they wanted to be out there on the field. And it was that was the craziest part about all of this, is that Alabama, they just looked uninspired. It was just the performance was poor, but it was just like, ugh, like just weak sauce. There was no fire, no juice. Florida State clearly wanted it more, and they played hard, a lot harder than Bama. And that's really why this is just so stunning. I mean, yeah, Florida State went 2-10 last year, and while we all at least I expected them to have a better year this year record-wise, I did not expect them to pop a win like this for week 1. I expected this to be a little wobbly. Maybe they play a bit conservative at times because they're just trying to kind of get this thing stabilized. But no, my God, they were playing out of their freaking minds. It kind of felt like Bama was playing as if though they thought they're supposed to win, and they forgot that they actually had to play to win. And their opponent, in this case, Florida State, played as the hunter, and they were freaking swinging a hammer at them every time the ball was snapped. Alabama rushed for 87 yards in this game. 55 of those were on the first drive, and that drive that I mentioned where I sat back and pulled out my phone when Alabama went down the field and scored after running for 55 yards on that first drive, I was like, God, this is going to suck. But no, it was great. They were combined 8 of 22 on 3rd and 4th downs. Oh, and like I said, back to that yardage real quick, 87 for the entire game, 55 on that first drive. So they only rushed for 32 yards-ish. Don't check my math there. 32 yards for the rest of the game. I mean, that's something. Like I said, combined 8 for 22 on 3rd and 4th down. 8 penalties. That was the other thing. Not only did they play uninspired, they played undisciplined. 8 penalties for 70 yards that were very costly. There were several key moments in this game where the flag was thrown on Alabama because they were personal foul or holding or something like that, and it cost them. No undisciplined, no competitive juice. Ty Simpson, when it comes to the quarterback, I mean, he looked green at times, which, he's been there for a while, but he the first year as a starter, he did look green, like I said, at times here and there. But, I mean, they didn't lose because of him, which is kind of, whenever you're losing and it's not because of the quarterback, it's because it's a team effort. You lost in spite of the performance of the quarterback. I mean, that's not really a mark that I want to have on me. I don't know about you, but like I said, the competitive juice and the preparedness were among the number one complaints last year for Alabama. And it seems like it might be a lingering issue. I mean, last year, think about that Vanderbilt game. They walked into that after playing Georgia, which it's ironic to talk about competitive juice whenever we also talk about them beating Georgia last year like they did. But whenever they think about that Vanderbilt game, I mean, they just looked kind of, like I said, like we're here to play, but we're supposed to win. And that's kind of mentally looked like how they played. And again, that's kind of how they played today. They just played without, that's kind of seems to be a lingering thing that pops up, and they don't always look ready to play. And I don't know why. I mean, it's obviously a reflection of that coaching staff and them just not being prepared enough, and them not playing from the right, in the right headspace. But it seems like it's a lingering issue, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. And for it to pop up in week 1 like it did, that just kind of that just kind of adds insult to injury for it to pop up week one like that. I mean, you'd think that team would be playing with more fire. I mean, it's week one. I mean, yeah, Florida State had a bad year last year, but you're in their stadium. I mean, they're a good brand name opponent. I mean, it's just that kind of at a loss for words at some point. I mean, it's just a little inexplicable, but Florida State, what a resounding way. Florida State, let's talk about them because they won the freaking game. What a resounding answer to the questions that we've been asking about this coaching staff all offseason. I mean, they must have been, clearly they were itching to get out on the field and get last season that terrible taste out of their mouth in the rearview mirror. We got Bama week one. Let's go start swinging hammers. And that's exactly what they did. They rushed for 236 yards to Alabama's 87. Like I said, they out-physicaled the Crimson Tide. 4 touchdowns on the ground. I mean, they just took it's what a great game this was. I'm hyping myself up about it here. It's almost midnight on Sunday, and I'm getting hyped up about the game from yesterday. They were 100% on 4th downs, 2 for 2. They extended drives well, 7 for 14 on 3rd and 4th combined. Thomas Castellanos, what a dog. He backed up the talk on the field from the offseason. 9 for 14 for 152 yards passing, 16 carries for 78 yards on the ground. That dude was absolutely, it was a team effort for Florida State, but that dude did a lot. He did his part for sure. A lot of great passing. He had some great balls through the air that really, in clutch moments, not just, these were clutch moments that he was throwing great balls through the air. Receivers came up big. It was an impressive, feat for that offense. Overall, though, some final thoughts here. Like I said, one of the least prepared Alabama teams we've seen in recent history. Just the embarrassment of the loss cannot be overstated. And that's not a shot at Florida State. It's just because, like I said, Bama had no fire. I'm going to keep harping on it because it's just it's after so many years of just watching them be utterly dominant, it's just kind of crazy to see. Mark Norvell got the answer to a lot of his questions about the staff and the team, that they assembled. The answers I think they liked, at least for week one. We found out definitively that they have a higher ceiling than was expected, I would say. Because even if it doesn't at the end of the year show up in the win-loss record, at least right now we know, hey, you're capable of beating maybe not a top 10 team, but they have a lot of talent and they're going to be a pretty good team, I would think. So we've proven what we're capable of. Now, can we string together, 9 more wins, maybe make the conference title game after going 2-10? That would be a hell of a turnaround. But like I said, we've proven what our ceiling can be here this season. So Florida State's remaining schedule. This is one of the fun things is going back and looking through schedules after you have some games that you can, in some performances that you can use as a parameter. East Texas A&M, Kent State for Florida State. This is for Florida State schedule, like I'm saying. East Texas A&M, Kent State, I would say those are both wins. At Virginia, I'd mark that as a win. Another thing is, like, whenever you're going through in the preseason doing like win-loss toss, if you go back through with some performance under your belt, those, in this case for Florida State, those losses turn to tosses, and those tosses kind of turn to wins at a certain point. So Miami, that's a toss. I would have put that as a loss earlier, but that's a toss now. Pitt, toss. Stanford and Wake Forest, I'm going to say you're going to win that. Clemson's a toss now. Right? Virginia Tech, and they played pretty well today against South Carolina, but I'll give you that, although maybe that's a toss. NC State and at Florida. NC State, I'd say, is a win. Florida, probably a toss. I'd see at least 5 wins. Losses, like I said, turn to tosses. For Alabama, ULM and Wisconsin, I'm going to give you those. I don't think Wisconsin's anything. Georgia, that's a loss. If you play like that against Georgia, you're going to get smoked. My God, I don't want to watch that game if you're going to play like this. Vanderbilt, I'm going to put that as a toss, and I don't say that tongue in cheek. I'm going to put Vanderbilt as a toss for Alabama because A, they beat you last year, And B, you've shown that whole lack of competitiveness thing is now a year-over-year issue. It's not a one-off of this transition year from Nick Saban to Kalen DeBoer. It is now a reoccurring thing season to season. And, I mean, that's not good. Vanderbilt, that's a toss. And like I said, that is not tongue-in-cheek. Missouri, that's a toss for Alabama. Tennessee, if Tennessee lights you up like they did Syracuse, I mean, that you're going to lose that game. South Carolina, you can lose that game. LSU, you can lose that game. Oklahoma, toss. East Illinois, yeah, that's a win. Auburn, you can lose that game. There's 3 definitive wins on Bama's schedule, and that's because they have a pretty tough schedule. Those tosses become losses, and those wins become tosses. I mean, 3 definitive wins, like I said, that you can absolutely say they're going to win this game. I see 3 games. And I'm not saying that they're going to go 3-9, but I am saying that they're going to have a hell of a lot of work to do, and there's a long freaking path in front of them. And if they keep playing that uninspired ball, then they're going to lose a lot of games this year. So, passionate about that one. Great game. I can't tell you enough. Like I said, that game really saved the 2:30 window, especially after that first drive. But Florida State, I'm excited to watch what they turn into this year. Same thing for Alabama. Even though I was pretty negative on them, I am excited to watch them, even if that means, sorry, they continue to lose. All right, continuing on here. Let's back up a little bit to Thursday night. Nebraska in Cincinnati. Did you know that was supposed to be a Cincinnati home game, by the way? I just wanted to, just checking. I mean, the announcers, they said it only 50 freaking times in the broadcast. But final, Nebraska 20, Cincinnati 17. Whew. Nebraska, they won a 1-score game, but they nearly gave it away. It wasn't for lack of trying to give it away, but they didn't. So there's that. I'm not confident, and I hate to come out of the gate swinging at Nebraska after they won a game, but I mean, I'm not confident in that level of play translating to a lot of wins in the Big Ten for Nebraska. I mean, Cincinnati ran for 202 yards. That's 7. They ran for 7 a carry on you. They almost got a first down every time they freaking handed the ball off. So how's that going to, that's not going to translate well to the Big Ten. And they passed for 69 yards. So it's not like Cincinnati had a balanced offensive attack and they were aggressive through the air and on the ground and put up 400 yards. No, they were abysmal through the air. They could barely complete a pass. They were, I think, sub 30 yards through the air going into the fourth quarter. So, I mean, I don't know. It's 202 on the ground whenever you're throwing the ball that bad. And they turned the ball over twice. Cincinnati did. Fumble and an interception. So, not a great performance defensively from Nebraska. Teams left on the schedule. They got Michigan still. They got USC still. They got Penn State still. They got Iowa still. I mean, whenever you're playing those teams, maybe I'm not going to, whenever you're playing Michigan, Penn State, and Iowa, your offense, if it plays like it did, is not going to be enough to overcome the defenses that those teams are going to put on the field. And your defense, especially your run defense, is not going to hold up. Those teams are going to absolutely grill you on the ground running the ball. And USC is just going to smoke you through the air. I don't think that Nebraska is going to this whole Matt Rule year 3 thing. I've been pretty quiet about that. I haven't mentioned that because it doesn't mean anything. He happened to have 2 good year 3s at previous stops. And I know that people like to say that that's like his money year. If he plays like they did this past week against Cincinnati, then, I mean, they're going to lose 4 or 5 games this year. And honestly, like I said, they tried to give the one on Thursday away. So not trying to overreact to week 1. I mean, they could. It's just I didn't see a whole lot there from them, So they're just kind of missing something. I kind of touched on this in the offseason. Like, they're still building to me. They haven't arrived yet. I can't quite put my finger on it. I just think Nebraska is still missing something. And as for Cincinnati, the receivers can't catch. Thank God for the running backs and the fact that the quarterback can run well enough. Not really quite sure what to make of their Big 12 potential yet, but, they still have to play at Kansas, Iowa State, Baylor, at Utah, and at TCU. They could maybe go 2-3 through those. You know, maybe at this point 1-4 because Utah looks like they're going to be pretty good this year. So, that's Nebraska, who should be an upper echelon Big Ten team playing probably a lower tiered Big 12 team, and they barely got out of there with the win, and they tried to give that thing away. So I'm not super high on Nebraska. I wasn't coming into the year. I'm even lower after that performance, even though it was a win, just because it wasn't really that inspiring. So yeah, not gonna keep harping on it. Not a lot left to say about it. Just not big on Nebraska this year. But you know who I might be big on? I might be a little higher on, might be a little more optimistic on Auburn. I talked about Auburn as a team with a wide range of variability of outcome, and I still believe that to be the case, but they did play pretty well against Baylor. Hugh Freeze it was kind of funny to watch Hugh Freeze in this battle with himself, because Auburn was just sitting in too high all night and they were just getting gashed on the ground by, not Auburn, sorry, Baylor was just sitting in too high all night and they were just getting thrashed on the ground by Auburn. And Hugh Freeze I just kept getting the sense that he just wanted to start slinging the ball around, and he never really did, but there were a few drives where he was trying to kind of throw it when he really didn't have to, and you could just kind of feel the impatience of him just wanting to, show it through the air, and it was kind of funny, but whatever. The final of this game, Auburn 38, Baylor 24. So, Baylor could not stop the run. Auburn put up 307 yards on the ground. Jackson Arnold, now here's where it gets funky. Jackson Arnold was the leading rusher for Auburn. 16 carries for 137 yards. 27 was his longest run. And some of that was him scrambling, but a lot of it was designed quarterback runs. Alston and Cobb, they both had 16 carries as well. Arnold through the air, he was 11 for 17 for 108 yards. So all 4 touchdowns came on the ground. I'm not super confident in them. They can't play like that in the SEC. I'll just put that out there. But if you told me on Monday that Cam Coleman would have 1 catch in this game for 23 yards, I probably would have put the rent on Baylor, because that's, I going into this game, I expected Auburn to I thought that maybe we would have somewhat of a stalemate at the line of scrimmage. Maybe Auburn wouldn't be able to run the ball well, and they're going to have to get the ball out to their wide receivers on the edge. The whole Jimmy's and Joe's beat X's nose thing. That's kind of the drum I was banging. But that's not how it played out at all. Auburn, they did, did they? I don't know. Did they simply take what the defense was giving them? And that's why they ran. Like I said, the defense was just sitting too high. They weren't stacking the box. They weren't really trying to stop the run. They kept expecting, I guess just the D-line and those backers to stop it, and they just never really could. So was that just because the defense was, that's what they were giving them, or was that the game plan? Because if that was the game plan, then it makes me worry a touch about Jackson Arnold. It makes me think that Arnold can't be counted on, to throw through the air. But, I would like to have the answer to that question. But as far as the SEC goes, Jackson Arnold has to throw more than he's going to be able to run if they want to have a successful season there. You can't go in and play Georgia, maybe Alabama, but you can't go in and play a team like Georgia, for example, and carry the ball 16 times if you're the quarterback for Auburn and be the leading rusher for the team and expect to come out with a win. The good news is you had 0 turnovers in this game against Baylor, but like I said, you didn't really throw the ball. Baylor, on the other hand, they had to rely on the pass. Sawyer Robinson, 27 of 48 for 419 yards and 3 touchdowns. They couldn't get a lot going on the ground, so Auburn was pretty tough up front. They didn't really seem, I still don't know why. I don't know if they were just terrified of the pass and Dave Aranda was just determined to not let Auburn beat him through the air. But at a certain point, that's dumb because they just beat you on the ground. Whenever Auburn did throw, they didn't really look great. So, I don't know. Baylor just kind of played scared defensively. It was just kind of, I don't know, just kind of head scratching. Not really sure why. I expected more aggressive, defense from Dave Rand. I expected some more erratic, blitzes and looks, but they were pretty vanilla, and I really don't know why. So Auburn, I think that, maybe I'd say we're gonna arrow higher on the 8-4, 9-3 side of things. It's just gonna depend on how Jackson Arnold throws the ball, because like I said, he's not going to be able to run it and be the leading rusher all season going through an SEC schedule, and they don't have a super easy one. So, but they did beat Baylor pretty good. So I'm curious to see where Baylor winds up finishing in the Big 12. And once we get to the end of the year, we can look back on this game and kind of have a little bit more apples to apple type of comparison. All right, we've got 2 more games to go here, and I'm just going to go in order. Side note, I did terrible betting this weekend. I don't know. I mean, I kind of have a rule, like a loose rule of not betting in week 1. And for the most part, I followed it, but there were a few, 1 or 2 games I put money on. Miami and Notre Dame, for example, I put money on that one. That did not turn out well. I put money on, this is embarrassing. After Ohio State, they scored that first touchdown on Texas, and I took the over at like 35.5 because I thought that it would be kind of one of those things, like sometimes in these games that seem like defensive battles, you'll have, a quarter and a half of just pure defensive struggle, and then you'll have someone, they finally break through and they score a touchdown, and then it just kind of like busts the game wide open, and then the opponent answers, and then you got 14 on the board combined, and then you hit them back, and before you know it, it's, the total in the game is like 56 or something. So that's kind of how I thought at one point it was going to go, but that did not turn out to be the case at all. So looking back, it was dumb, but I stand by my logic in the moment. So, but speaking of games that I didn't bet on, LSU 17, Clemson 10. Whew. I feel a little, I feel like maybe I misled myself a little bit. Maybe I can't trust myself as much as I thought I could when it comes to LSU, because LSU played very well in this game. The defense was dominant, especially on the line of scrimmage. I mean, the D-line was very, very good for LSU, and they weren't terrible last year, but the jump they made, at least for week 1 year over year, was pretty, it was noticeable. The secondary also, the jump the secondary made as well, in combination with that D-line, especially with the safety AJ Halsey back there. It was kind of like a night and day first and second half. It was strange, but the jumps those 2 units made, especially, collectively, it was pretty impressive to see. And welcome back Harold Perkins, 5 tackles, 1 sack, 1.5 tackles for loss. Playing in that star position. I say that like I know what that means, but whatever. Harold Perkins playing in the star position. He was wreaking havoc. He had some key plays and some key moments. And, both quarterbacks in this game, they did throw for exactly 230. Difference being Nuss had a touchdown and Klubnik had an interception. So there's that. But LSU in this game, the run defense was really one of the biggest differences. They held Clemson to 32 yards on the ground for, that's 1.7 per carry. They have another big dynamic tight end, Bear Sharp, to replace Mason Taylor. If you're watching LSU at all in the last couple of seasons, they have that big dynamic tight end Mason Taylor that was a hell of a compliment to the wide receivers that they've been running on the outside out there. If you finally have a play or something where you get those receivers covered up and you're downfield, the play is kind of about to break down, and there's that freaking tight end just busting out wide open. So it was really annoying to watch if you were playing them, but they've got another one, so there's that. Wide receivers, they were pretty speedy. They had some good hands yesterday. The biggest note, like I said, the defense won you the game in this one in the end. The secondary is, included in that. So it's been a little while since we were able to say that the LSU defense won them the game in the end. Obviously, they not just outright, but especially in the end, they held on. So Clemson, I didn't see as much collective progression out of the gate, at least as I expected. I was kind of wondering, is Clemson going to, if you take the entire team and just kind of everyone at each position, I know it's just a hell of an oversimplification, but if everyone just kind of takes a collective step forward, like everyone just gets a little bit better, I think that they're going to be a really good team. And that's what I expected of them this year. But as of, yesterday, it didn't really seem so much to be that way. Maybe a touch here and there, but not collectively. The run game needs to do better than they did. Like I said, 32 yards on the ground. So you got to do better there. That O-line's got to come through for you. I still think they're going to be a contender in the ACC, but the schedule looks a lot harder now after Florida State yesterday. They go to Georgia Tech. Like I said, they play Florida State. They go to Louisville. They also play South Carolina, who's going to be quite the handful. So Brian Kelly, he has proved, and this is not the first time he's proven this at LSU, but he has proved again that he has the ability to make the right moves when hiring staff and setting up the organization to acquire talent and win a big game. Because that was starting to be a little bit, there's starting to be some doubt around that aspect of Brian Kelly after the last 2 seasons. But, I'm a little concerned about Clemson if you want to switch back to them down the stretch. I don't know how, I'm not super in tune with their depth there. I'm not super confident on it. And, if they make it to the postseason, I'm a little concerned for Clemson there after what I saw yesterday. Question I have about LSU is, can the defense just stay consistent? Because you played out of your mind yesterday. You played pretty well. But can you stay consistent and do that all season long? Because if you have, some of these games, because you can lose a game where the defense plays well because you just played, an offense that was on fire. But if you have something like that happen and then 2 or 3 games where the defense just kind of no-shows out of nowhere, then you're kind of looking at an 8-4, 9-3 type season there again, and it's just not where you want to go, and that's with defensive improvement. So they've got to be consistent and come up big in all of these big games, because LSU still has Florida, at Ole Miss, South Carolina, Texas A&M, at Alabama, Arkansas at home, and at Oklahoma. So you can't rest if you're that LSU defense. You have to show up. You can't no-show in any of these games, because LSU is on a trajectory right now that is very hard to get on in the first case. And once you're on it, you do not want to fall off it, because it's just that much more disappointing. If they play defense all season like they did yesterday, they can be a 10 or 11 win team. That's what I think about LSU. Coming into the season, that's not what I thought. I was not super low on them. I guess, sure, I was low on them. Wasn't crazy confident. But after yesterday, I'm a little bit higher on them. I'm not ready to say that they're going to go and win the national championship yet, but I think that they're absolutely going to be a contender for the SEC, and that means the playoff as well. Even if not the SEC, even if they don't make the conference championship game, they're probably going to be an at-large team. So they're definitely, I'd say, probably going to be a playoff team. But I don't know. They proved to me yesterday, at least defensively, that they have the legs to get there. Final game to get in here, and then I got just some kind of college football, just landscape, just overall, big picture stuff that I want to kind of touch on. But it is Sunday night. This game did just happen a little earlier this evening. But Notre Dame at Miami, final score, Miami 27, Notre Dame 24. Now, I put out a tweet that I'm taking, it was a couple days ago. I said, I'm taking the Notre Dame points, where I'm taking Notre Dame -2.5. Feels like free money. And I had to put out another one, a quote tweet, and said the money was in fact not free, because Notre Dame did not cover that spread. Miami did, and they won the game outright. They bullied Notre Dame on the line of scrimmage. I was not expecting to see that. That was one of the big things I was betting on for Notre Dame, at least in this game. But Miami absolutely bullied Notre Dame around on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Frankly, Carson Beck Carson Beck looked great. He was 20 for 30 for 205 yards and 2 touchdowns. He looked like he did a few years ago, in 2023, because 2024 he came into the season as the Heisman favorite, probably a first-round draft pick at quarterback. Ended up not even going to the draft, obviously, ends up at Miami, and he looks great. I mean, he looks really good. And the receivers, they replaced them very well as well. Notre Dame, though, they kind of looked like what I thought they would look like last year against Texas A&M. The O-line kind of got bullied. The quarterback just wasn't super efficient. That's just kind of what I thought they would look like last year against A&M. It just showed up this year kind of out of nowhere in my mind. I mean, I know they lost some talent, but I thought they replaced it or kind of backfilled pretty well. Miami, the delay in Carson Beck grasping a new system because of that injury he came into Miami with and not throwing to receivers until fall camp and that whole thing, that didn't show up in any negative light at all. The defensive line, like I said, was dominant. They held Notre Dame to 93 yards on the ground, which I kind of thought was going to be Notre Dame's bread and butter coming into this game. The O-line gave Carson Beck some pretty clean pockets. They ran the ball okay. Notre Dame, on the other hand, I want to know what's going on here with Jeremiah Love because he only got 10 carries for 33 yards. And for you math wizards out there, that's 3.3 per carry. Last season, he carried the ball for 10 times or less in 5 games. And the opponents that he carried the ball 10 times or less in, all due respect, were Purdue, Stanford, Florida State, Army, and Indiana. So games that, kind of seems like maybe they were saving him a little bit, didn't want to overwork him or risk injury. But today, I mean, it's a big opponent. You've got these two kind of marquee opponents at the beginning of the season. Miami, obviously, here, and Texas A&M here in a couple of weeks. And I kind of would have thought that he would have got more work. It makes me wonder a little bit. I mean, he didn't look, whenever he did carry it, he didn't really look to me like he was struggling or hurt. But it makes me wonder if he is, because he only got, I don't know why he only got 10 carries. He's the best player on your team, one of the best on the field, and they just didn't really hand him the ball. And Jadarian Price, it's not like he was getting a lot of usage. Oh, and by the way, in those games that Jeremiah Love didn't carry the ball a whole lot in last year, Jadarian Price did carry the load in those games. But here today, that was not the case. He only carried the ball 6 times, but he was a lot more efficient, 45 yards on those 6 carries, 7.5 per carry. So I don't really know why they weren't running the ball with him. I mean, the quarterback ran the ball more than either one of them. He carried it 11 times. And yeah, some of that's scrambling, but that was also designed runs. So I don't know why you're having your quarterback run out there more than your running backs. It's a little strange to me, But CJ Carr, like I said, 11 times on the ground. He was a little green. He played pretty well, but he was a little green. He had 2 intentional grounding penalties. One of them was on the game-winning drive, or would be game-winning drive, maybe field goal to tie it. Intentional grounding really cost him that drive, and like I said, he had another one. He overthrew the ball at times. He was kind of off target here and there. The O-line was pedestrian. They kind of got bullied at times, but they were more pedestrian for Notre Dame. So just kind of weird offensive game plan. I'm not really sure what they were thinking going into that. I'm not questioning it. It just seemed kind of odd to me. Wasn't at all what I expected. The Miami progression under Cristobal is interesting here because Miami, his first year, they went, 5-7, and it was just kind of a mess. But year 1, whatever. Year 2, I think 7-5, 8-4, somewhere in that ballpark. But they had these, game management issues that just kind of plagued them. Lost them, like the Georgia Tech game, for example. Year 3, last year, you got Cam Ward, elite offense, but your defense just sucks. And then, so coming into this year, we have this 1 game sample size, but they're not perfect. I almost said perfect. It would have been silly. They weren't perfect, but they played really well. They played, disciplined. The players looked elite. They were playing hard. They were playing competitive. There were no glaring game management, calls that risked anything. that all got tightened up. So the progression there under Cristobal has been pretty interesting year over year. It's, kind of been some linear progression so far. They looked like a serious threat to the ACC at least tonight. If maybe the best team in the conference, dare I say. They put up probably a top 5 national performance for the week. So I don't know. They look like a pretty damn good team. They're definitely going to be a problem if the defense is consistent like this. If they really did solve the defense in the secondary and that D-line plays like they did, and Miami's going to be a problem. That combined with Carson Beck playing like he did tonight, if he, puts performance after performance like that out all year, I mean, we're going to have a problem with Miami. They're definitely going to be a playoff team. I don't know what to think about Notre Dame right now. They have to get right for Texas A&M. Fortunately, they scheduled a bye week for this next week, which talk about that in a second, but I'm not confident that they win if they play like this again. If they play like they played tonight against Texas A&M, I mean, I think they might be in for an 0-2 start, which they can't really afford, in my opinion. But it's kind of odd to me that they have a bye week here in week 2. They're clearly, intentional with this. Miami week 1, bye. Texas A&M at home week 3. I'm not so sure that it's a good thing. I mean, it's probably a good thing. I kind of got this thing with bye weeks where sometimes, teams go into bye weeks, take it, much needed rest, recover, mental break and everything, and you come out well rested, energized, bang, flying out of the bye week like, you got out of a slingshot. But then there's a lot of teams too that come out of a bye week and they just come out flat, and it's because they get knocked out of their rhythm, right? Like you're playing game in, game out. You got a routine. Things are going, however, and then you go into a bye week and it kind of interrupts it and you just come out flat. So I wonder kind of how that translates here with it being this early in the season, with them having week 1. You got all off season, you got fall camp, you're ramping up. Boom, week 1's here at Miami. Bang. And then you have a bye week and you got to like kind of sit around for a week. I don't know. It's kind of odd. Texas A&M too is also, I mean, they're kind of doing this weird thing. I think they're kind of being a little vanilla, which, almost bit them a bit against UTSA, but they kind of seem to be playing vanilla, maybe intentionally, because they've got, 2 opponents that can kind of ramp up into that Notre Dame game. So I don't really know. I don't know. It seems kind of risky to me, in my opinion, honestly, to have a bye week like this early in the season. But Notre Dame, they still, like I said, obviously play Texas A&M at Arkansas, Boise State, and USC. Not a lot of other notable games on the schedule. Miami, on the other hand, they got South Florida coming up. Played pretty well against Boise. You got Florida then, and you have at Florida State. So those 3 games look a lot harder now than they did, in May. You got Louisville on the schedule and at SMU. So I think Miami, if Miami plays on defense like they did today and Carson Beck plays this well, I mean, we could be in for, they could go 11-1, 12-0. That is not out of the realm of possibility at all for Miami. But regardless, like I said, overall, a little surprised at Notre Dame. Interested to see what they put out on the field week 3. But as for now, Miami is going to be a fun team to watch, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. All right, wrapping up here. I got some elite teams of the week, some good and some bad. So let's start with the elite. Ohio State, you looked great defensively, especially like I harped on for so long in that 14-7 win over Texas. Just got done talking about Miami beat Notre Dame 27-24. Looked great. LSU, that defense, there's a common thread here if you haven't noticed with these first 3 teams, and it's defense. LSU 17-10 over Clemson. Florida State, just great complimentary football, great on offense, attacking Alabama on the ground, really good on defense there. Won 31-17. Those were the 4 elite of the week. The good, Auburn, and that win at Baylor 38-24. Again, attacking them on the ground. Colorado, you lost 27-20, but you looked a lot better than I thought you would. I thought Colorado was going to fall off the freaking map this season, and they might, because it's only week 1. They still might, but as of their week 1 performance, they looked a hell of a lot better than I thought they would. They surprised me, so got to give credit where credit is due. Colorado, you did play pretty well week 1, even in that loss. Tennessee, this is going to be a story this year. If Tennessee plays electric like that on offense all year like they did against Syracuse, they might be bumped up to that elite category. But right now, I don't think Syracuse is super good. So that's kind of why I just have them here in the good range for Tennessee in that 45-26 win. Utah, welcome back to college football. You beat UCLA 43-10. And South Carolina, you beat Virginia Tech today 24-11. But I will say, don't want to take anything away from South Carolina. Virginia Tech did kind of shoot themselves in the foot constantly in that game. So, but South Carolina, you won. Credit you for that. 1-0. The bad teams, Kansas State, you won, but you played North Dakota State 38-35. You were down, I think, with 40-something seconds to go left in the fourth quarter. You almost let this game slip away and lost to North Dakota. So Kansas State, something was going on here. Not super promising there and at Kansas State so far this year. So UCLA lost to Utah, obviously 43-10. Alabama, bad. Alabama lost to Florida State 31-17. Just disgusting. Last little segment here. It's going to be a quick one, I promise. SEC. Who is in Tier 1 of the SEC at this point? Is it only Georgia? Because Georgia, they played Marshall yesterday, so until farther notice, I think they're going to be up there. Texas, are they? I think Texas is probably still Tier 1 if Arch Manning rounds into form, and I expect him to, so I'll leave them there for now. Alabama, dare we put them there? I don't think so. So I'd say Tier 1 of the SEC, we're probably down to Georgia and Texas, and they play each other, so that'll be fun. Georgia only, no. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Georgia and Texas. ACC contenders, this is a big thing that, it's funny because the only thing that changed is Florida State being added to this category, but it feels like it changed like the whole landscape of the ACC. Clemson, you're kind of there by default, but you're also, obviously, you're there by default because you're really good. Big surprise candidate there in Florida State. The only question really for them right now is can they sustain, or was that just a, motivated performance because it was Alabama and Miami looked elite but against Notre Dame, so same thing here, can that defense sustain? So just some overall questions, nothing super important, kind of I'm not going to say pointless segment because it's about college football, but regardless, without anything else, that is it for me for this show. We'll be back here in a couple of days with week 2 previews. But until next time, thank you for listening to the College Football Podcast. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, like the video on YouTube, follow on the social channels at Campus Pigskin, follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode, leave a 5-star review, and until next time, thanks for listening.